The two championship contenders giving it everything.
No, Mikey. No, Mikey.
It's lights out.
No, Mikey.
And away we go.
All right, what's going on, everybody? Welcome to Season 3 of the Pitstop Pals. Dusty and Gager back with you once again, getting you set 2024 season preview. Gager, FP1, FP2. It's been a pretty good day, hasn't it?
It's been a breath of fresh air for today, Dusty. I've loved it. Lots of questions too, going into from basically testing to FP1 and FP2. Lots of things to talk about already. Has the gap been closed? Max Verstappen already in an interview saying he predicts a very tight qualifying. Of course he does.
He always says that.
But you know what? I got the alarm set. We'll get up for maybe not right away, maybe a delay an hour. Go watch free practice 3, see where they're finally at before qualifying, and we'll go from there.
You know, I was telling you, I wasn't feeling great today, so I had a big nap this afternoon, and then I laid around and watched the first 2 episodes of Drive to Survive this season. Good Aston Martin episode to kind of get things going. Love the way they started the season with, like, views of the off-season for guys in Canada and all around the world. I like seeing Max Verstappen get extremely frustrated with pickleball, which I thought was kind of funny. Dude's super competitive. But then, you know, a couple of things came out of it. We'll get to the Danny Ric. How many episodes have you watched? Have you already crushed the whole thing?
No. I'm exactly where you are. I just got up to the Danny Ricciardo and the replacement of Nick DeVries. It was. I mean, I don't know. Don't you think that they've done a little bit differently this year with, you know, going through the teams and obviously with Stroll and Mr. Stroll having to be announced as the going to his own party? I thought that was just hilarious. And then, but. You know, I had high hopes for Nick DeVries at the start of the season.
You did,
but
yeah.
But then you saw there was one point where I think he went to wets and he was asking for the right configuration on the steering wheel. He didn't know what to input or how to do it, and I was like, well, that should be like automatic for a driver knowing what mode to put the car in for something different. You could hear the disdain from the pit wall saying that we'll talk about this after. And yeah, I mean, it's a ruthless sport. You don't perform and you're out. And being in that Red Bull, we've seen what Red Bull's done to drivers. If they're not performing, that seat is taken away.
We've got a new look here for Season 3 of the Pitstop Pals, more of the EST branded look. Looks pretty good. We are live on the Edmonton Sports Talk YouTube as well, so if you're over there in the nasty chat, feel free to chime in on the upcoming Formula One season, as we'll try to bang out episodes every single week. You'll find it on the podcast as well, podcast page at edmontonsportstalk.com. You can find Pitstop Pals on all of your podcasting platforms as well. The one thing I took away, which is kind of why we tied in, because you said there's a lot of storylines just from today, and this is a season preview episode, but we'll certainly kind of tie it into Bahrain. But the importance of last year's first race, watching back to those first couple of episodes and, you know, reading some previews now, it's like teams will get a feel after the first race what type of season it's going to be. It is kind of funny with how long the season is, Gager. And we did see Aston Martin start well and fall off, and McLaren didn't start well last year and ended up really surging in the second half. So I guess we can still say it's a long season, but I thought on the first 2 episodes of the new season on Netflix of Drive to Survive, it's pretty important this first race to find out exactly what you have.
Well, yeah, you could see it with the whole talking with Stroll wanting to get to the front of the pack and how he's developed the cars, poaching people from Red Bull, you know, surrounding himself with the best people. I think Fernando Alonso had a lot of input with that. You know, you've heard about how Lewis has been very vocal about the past few seasons of not taking his input on the direction of their car. And now they say they've finally listened to Lewis, which is funny. I love the behind the scenes kind of stuff. seeing what Ricardo kind of went through, Christian Horner talking about, if he would have done that lap, he would have been on the front row with Max at that point, getting back into that seat. I'm a little bit, after watching practice and hearing some of the commentary today, Alpine really on the back foot there.
That's what it sounds like, eh?
Their whole aerodynamic package doesn't seem to be working. They seem to be like where McLaren was at the beginning of last year, where they just think we're not going to be competitive till at least the midway point of this season, which it's a little bit frustrating because I like those two drivers, and this was a chance for maybe Gasly. Everyone's looking at that next Mercedes seat that's up for grabs. Toto's talking about it. That's one of my points that we'll get to a little bit, but it's there's. I don't know. I'm so excited for qualifying to see what actually happens, because that's gonna answer, I think, a lot of questions for us, because up to this point, Dusty, it's all speculation.
Yeah, exactly. I know. There's nothing against testing or anything. But even today from FP1 and FP2, I mean, the RB team performing very well in FP1, and then Mercedes going 1-2 in FP2. I was reading a little bit on X tonight about how Ferrari and Red Bull still have some more power sitting in their garage getting ready for whether it's FP3 or qualifying this week. So, I mean, maybe a false sense of hope here for Mercedes, but still, you have to be happy with what would have happened today.
Well, I think Max last year, his fast that was 129, and it was, so the Mercedes was 0.4 off of that,
just
pace
over
last
130
year.
today, right?
So that's good. That's a good sign for Mercedes. But how turned up was the power unit on the Red Bull car for the past 2 days, right? So it could have been turned down. I'm sure there's going to be a few tightening of the bolts here and upping up the power of that unit. But who knows? I mean, I'm really excited to see McLaren. They were in free practice 1. They looked really strong too. Always that one lap speed with Haas too. Like you saw Magnussen and Hulkenberg put in some pretty good times with on that one lap pace, but just that car seems to be eating its tires, and you just can't. It just falls off after a while. So we'll see. I'm hopeful with Haas. I know they don't have Gunther Steiner, which is unfortunate anymore. Watching Drive to Survive, I'm gonna miss him.
When he was fishing, I was just like, this is just effing boring.
Yeah, it's great.
The Drive to Survive is going to miss Gunther for sure. There's no doubt about that. All right, let's dive into some of the storylines here. I mean, we have to start with Red Bull after the dominant campaign that Max and the Red Bull team put together last season. They have changed the car design heading into this season. Gager, how much do you expect it to impact them? And does this end up being another Red Bull runaway to the level that it was last year? Or are we viewing them as they're definitely still going to win, but other teams are going to be somewhat competitive with them?
Well, if we look back to when they were fined for going over that cost cap, Dusty, last year wasn't going to hurt them that much. It was this year that the wind tunnel time was going to really affect them. And the fact that they've drastically changed the whole concept of that car, almost going to that no side pods, which was... we were talking before. Mercedes just must be.
I thought the reviews weren't good of the no side pods, right?
Of that. So and everyone seemed to be going, like, copying the RB20, and doing that, and they've gone in a completely different direction. So they have to have something up their sleeve with this. We'll see tomorrow. I think they're going to be dominant at the start. But as we saw, like, teams were so far behind Red Bull at the beginning of the season last year. When you look today and you saw the lap times, 1 through 20 was 2 seconds. That wasn't the case last year. There was like 8-9 seconds between that in practice time. So yeah, I think that it's going to tighten everything up. But again, we won't really know until that first qualifying session and see what kind of times Max puts down. I found it interesting today, Dusty, to hear old Helmut Marko say that the second Red Bull seat is an ejector seat. Because Max Verstappen is the best driver on the planet. No one can compare to Max. It's if you're not performing, we're just going to get you out and get someone else in there. But
Yeah.
it's useless. It doesn't matter because we have the best driver.
Yeah.
So I love it.
Checo's kind
Right
of
at the
sitting there like, what am I supposed to
Yeah.
do here? Well, I,
Yeah.
before we moved on for Red Bull, I was going to ask, what are your thoughts on what does Checo need to accomplish this year to hang on to that second seat? Because there's a few different guys certainly knocking on the door, or Red Bull might have a plan at least for a few other guys to step in.
Well, I mean, the last 2 seasons, he seems to have started well and then kind of fallen off later. He just has to be consistent. That car is a beast. He has to. It's been a few years now for him to get comfortable in that car. Alex Albon talks about it. He had that great statement where it's not that the car is hard to drive. It's just Max, with the way he likes the car set up, puts everyone a little bit on the back foot because he likes so much front end on his car. Like, he equated it to the sensitivity on a mouse being up to like 20 and just darting across you. That's how much he likes his car on the front end. So it takes a while for guys to get used to, but Max is putting, he's gaining tenths. So you're trying to push even further, and that's when you just start making mistakes. So I think Checo's he doesn't have to beat Max, but he has to be behind Max, right? To keep that seat, he has to have a solid season where Max isn't just pulling away from him, and other teams aren't catching Checo as well. He's got to solidify himself in that second kind of place.
Are you thinking like almost a Bottas to Lewis Hamilton back at Mercedes?
Yeah.
Like he was usually lurking around there.
Yeah, Valtteri. If Lewis messed up, Valtteri was probably going to win that race.
Exactly.
Right? Like we're lurking in the weeds. Like, just more so when Checo's first year with Red Bull, right? He was really competitive and really, but yeah, it just seemed to fall off after they went to the new style of car. But yeah, he's got to do better. Like Helmut Marko said, he's on the ejector seat.
Nielson and Gager with you here on the Pitstop Pals Season 3 season preview. If you're watching on YouTube tonight, you have any questions, feel free to fire those over. Fish Tank is in. He says, I hope Carlos Sainz does better than Leclerc and Ferrari gets in their own way again. So that's an easy transition to Ferrari, where we know the plan. Charles Leclerc, Lewis Hamilton in 2025. Carlos Sainz, I guess, racing basically in limbo, in purgatory this year, Gager. What do you expect from Ferrari, knowing that the discussion all season long will be that Lewis is on the way?
Well, rumors have it that Carlos is already signed with a team, so he's already he's already kind of solidified something. So I would say you probably hear something within the next few months, that the team that he's going to. As for Ferrari, Dusty, I mean, in our infancy of F1 fandom, they just haven't got anything right.
No.
Right? From reliability issues to the strategies, to the car not performing, drivers making critical mistakes. From all accounts, Freddie Vasseur's kind of done the whole forensic audit of the whole team, and towards the end of last year, I felt that they were kind of making some strides. Like they were a little bit more consistent. Maybe not. Charles was lurking there in a few races. Max was just too dominant. But the cars looked okay so far. They look pretty good. There's not the turmoil. You don't hear the frustration so far. I know it's only practice. I kind of listened to some helmet cams today with Ferrari.
you sounded sick puppy.
I know it's so bad. No. I would love to see Ferrari take steps with the vehicle, just because Lewis Hamilton licking his chops, getting into the prancing ponies next year.
The Pitstop Pals by F1 fans for F1 fans has always kind of been our slogan. One of the articles I read today is claiming that Ferrari thinks that their race pace is going to be much better this year, which is really what held them back last year, right? Gager, you mentioned they can't get out of their own way. They qualify insanely well, and then they would just sort of fall apart during the race. If they can somehow, because even with the mess that we constantly saw from them, they still looked like a car that could seriously contend when it was all said and done. It's just like if you can figure out the race pace on race day, I think they would be my pick for the team that could possibly challenge Red Bull if anybody challenges Red Bull.
Well, the strategy side of it seemed to get ironed out by the end of the year. Like they were, not that they were copying Red Bull, but there was more times in the race where Red Bull had to adjust to cover off Leclerc, or Carlos was doing something and Checo had to cover off, and they had to make adjustments to what Ferrari was doing at the latter part of last season. So that's, now you say like their race paces actually looks like it's going to be okay. Well, that's going to put even more pressure on Red Bull if that wind tunnel time really has affected them. And now other teams are, maybe they can challenge with a little bit more. I'm interested in Mercedes, Dusty, to see Lewis and George go 1-2 in free practice 2 again, and really pushing. Like even the commentators were talking about when Lewis was on just a killer lap. Like they could tell right away with the times he was putting down in certain sectors. Go, whoa, this is impressive right now. So it looks a lot better. Even to the point where, like usually you would hear Lewis or George talk about their car and things that, well, it's not quite there. There's nothing. They're saying they're happy with the setup. I think the fact that it's funny, Lewis just said moving the cockpit back a little bit, and even George commending Lewis about changing subtle things of the car, and happy about them actually listening to Lewis about this. I mean, is Mercedes going to challenge Red Bull again? Is Ferrari going to? That's what we've wanted for a couple years now. So
yeah, imagine if
oh.
Mercedes does challenge and Ferrari doesn't, and then Lewis is taken off to go to Ferrari next season. Like so much had to gone into that decision. He must have seen some of the plans for 2025, right? Like I don't think you're going into that blind, right? Had to have.
No, and when Lewis said, like when all that came out, I told you I looked up the Ferrari factory, and you see the Mercedes factory, you see Aston Martin. It's very modern, like metal and glass and stuff. You see the Ferrari it's like oozing culture and history with old cobblestone walls and the ivy growing on it. Don't get me wrong, there's some modern tech stuff in there as well, but it just go walking in there, it seemed to me like going into old Maple Leaf Gardens, right? Like that was when I was looking, oh, okay, I can see why Lewis wants to. It's iconic driving for Ferrari. So hope maybe, Dusty, maybe he knows, this is my last shot at challenging, and he wants to go out just with 1 year driving for a team that he probably dreamed of driving as a kid.
Yeah,
there's
so many legends drove for that team, right? So Mick Diesel kind of chimes in on what you were saying over in the Nasty Chat. Ferraris are built by an old Italian guy named Luigi, and he drinks too much while tuning the car. Which sounds about right, especially like the night before the race. It's like, let me at this. I will make sure it's all good. And doesn't
there's like cigarettes and cappuccinos and espressos, and they're
just a mess.
Just all sitting back, and like, well, I don't know.
And yada yada. Carlos Sainz is off the track on the third turn. I see a message from Matthew Awanek that says, who in your eyes is the favorite to win the driver championship and the constructors championship with the EST F1 League? Gager, is there a bounce back season coming for you? Is it Tony Brars to lose? Does Matt Cassian finally step up, stop complaining, and get the job done?
You can't see everyone's team, right? So again, this is another thing we're going to have to wait to see. I can't wait till the lockdown in a few hours, and we can actually look at other teams and how they're constructed, because fantasy, it's difficult, man. You pick one guy and you really got to scramble and try to maximize your points. So I'm sure there'll be some extra flipping early morning tomorrow. But Maddie, to answer your question, I don't have a good answer for you. I'm fully committed this year. I made some mistakes last year. You could say I was the Ferrari of last year's pool, just making mistakes that really cost me in the overall championship and in the constructors, which I'm happy to say that now the tears are dried and we have a constructors championship trophy for this year.
All right, let's stick with Mercedes. We brought up Mercedes before we got sidetracked with a couple of comments. If you are watching on YouTube and you have any questions, feel free to fire them over. We'll try to fit some in here on the Pitstop Pals 2024 season preview. How do you expect Mercedes to handle Lewis and George this year when they get in spots? And it does happen multiple times per year where they get in spots where it seems in a race you have to choose one guy or the other. Do they lean more towards George right now because he's the franchise moving forward?
I don't think so, Jesse.
No?
I think listening to Toto talk, he still has a relationship with Lewis. I find him to be extremely loyal as well, to almost to a fault. There was a lot of talk, and his name is Andrea Kimi Antonelli, is a young driver in the Mercedes system, driving first year in F2 that I will be keeping my eye on this year. They look back to the point where Mercedes had a chance to get Max Verstappen way back when, but because Lewis and their older established drivers, they lost him to Red Bull. And it seems like Toto doesn't want to make the same mistake again. I think that's one of the reasons why this seat, he's leaving his options open. Usually you'd hear some rumblings. Okay, this guy's the fast track for the second Mercedes seat. I think he's waiting on this young guy in F2, Andrea, to see what he's capable of. Everything that I've read about this kid, it's the same thing that you heard about Max. It's the same thing with Lewis. He is one of those generational talent drivers so far. So depending on how he does, bringing home an F2 championship, we could see a young buck in that second seat, and maybe a George Russell becoming the old guard at
the
Mercedes,
old veteran.
Yeah. So Toto said he took a shot at Lewis, saying it was a quick decision. He said he's going to wait, see the driver market, see what transpires in the season before he makes a decision on who's driving in that second seat with Mercedes.
So you don't think that is a Carlos Sainz landing spot then?
No, I don't.
No.
I don't.
Where the hell does he end up then?
I think Aston Martin has their eyes on Carlos Sainz. That's just me.
To replace the veteran Alonso.
To replace Alonso. And,
okay, that might make sense. That might make sense.
I think just.
Well, let's go there quickly.
Lance isn't going anywhere.
Yeah, exactly. I know. I was just watching. I don't know if it was like a hilarious joke or what, but on episode 1 of Drive to Survive this year, when he's like, "Yeah, me and my dad would go back quite a ways." I was just like, "Are you hilarious? Are you the stupidest dude I ever met in my life? Like, what's going on here?" So let's go with Aston Martin. Then we'll get to McLaren, because we're definitely going to get to McLaren and take a look at what other team could maybe make a jump this year from the bottom of the pack. But as far as Aston Martin goes, I mean, last year, remember at the beginning of the season, you're like, holy smokes, look at what's happening here with Alonso right now. Stroll was coming off the injury at the beginning of the season. He's always been a disappointment. Probably doesn't have a seat here if dad doesn't own the team, which is totally understandable. I mean, if I was a billionaire and loved something, I'd give Marshall a job too. You know? It'd be a lot of fun to kind of watch. But Gager, are you expecting, or what Aston Martin team are you expecting? First half or second half?
I look at them to be top of the middle of the pack, probably running in that 4 or 5 spot. I can see them doing that, with Alonso possibly creating some magic in certain races. He's so crafty, and depending on how well that car has developed, like, it was interesting to me, Dusty, when they kind of fell off last year. but they never brought any more improvements to the car. There were no upgrades after a certain point. That tells me that they were okay.
Yeah.
We've got something here. We have something that we can really work with. Let's put everything into next year's car. So whether that's worked or not, Fernando looked pretty good in one of the qualifyings. I think he was third overall in timing. Um, he's competitive. Lance, I mean, I'd love for Lance to challenge at some point, or I mean, he's Canadian. We'd automatically
Yeah.
start just cheering for him, right? But I just don't see that happening. Too many mistakes, and unless it's wet, Stroll is just not as good as the other drivers.
Nielson and Gager with you here on the Pitstop Pals. McLaren started poorly each of the last two seasons. Started to get it going pretty impressively in the second half of last year, Gager. I would have to think they pick up where they left off at some level, don't they?
Oh yeah, I think this is a team that's going to surprise. I mean, it was a surprising shock
Yeah.
at the end of last year where they were close. Piastri winning a sprint race. I still think that Piastri will win a Grand Prix before Lando. Um, I'm looking for that Lando Max battle because these guys are so chummy and buddy, but they really haven't gone wheel to wheel and seen the aggressiveness of each driver, right? So I want to see that friendship completely cracked at some point this year. And I think the way that McLaren was progressing, I think we have a good shot at that. Piastri, wonderful driver. I mean, and even though, like Dusty, like you could say, I don't know, is Lando, he's been with McLaren for a long time now. You know, if anything's wrong with this car, he just looking at the Drive to Survive episodes with him, they were talking to him about, he's been there for a while. He looked upset, and he's a great driver. He just didn't have the right equipment. You saw what he was capable of finally when he got something that he could use.
Yeah.
So I know this young kid, depending on how it goes, but Lando George Russell Mercedes, that's a formidable
Oh boy,
F1.
that'd be a good
unreal.
discussion. Yeah,
I
yeah,
got
because
time
when
for
when,
that.
when McLaren brought Lando in, it was like it was a huge deal, right? You're like, okay,
Huge
look at
gift.
what they've done here, and it just has not advanced. That's the other thing about this Drive to Survive. When it popped up as like season 6, I was like, what? We're on season
Yeah,
6
no.
of Drive to Survive already? Like, what the hell has happened here? I mean, pretty impressive. Pretty impressive. Okay, Gidger, what about the bottom? What about the bottom of the pack? Is there any team that you think legitimately can? I'm not saying compete in the top 3 or 4. I'm talking we kind of have Aston Martin as like the 5th team, McLaren probably in the 4th spot for now. Is there a team in the rest of the field that you think could take a step this year and cause issues for them?
No, it's just on certain tracks with that Williams car that still seems to have that great straight line speed. Albon was amazing last year, what he did. Not too hopeful with Logan Sargent. I mean, he could be an ejector seat if things progress the same way they did last year. Although he kind of reined it in a little bit, but that's the only team. That's the only driver I think that you could see, consistently from that group getting into probably Q3 just with that car, especially on tracks with that allow for more straight line speed. Sauber, I don't know, great looking car, but it still watching practice, watching testing, not a lot there. Seems like they're not happy with the progress of their car. Haas for fantasy, always good to have Hulkenberg in there because, like I said, it seems like that car is really good on one lap pace that they can both sometimes get it into that Q3 to get a few extra points for those fantasy guys. But when it comes to the race, it just drops off. And from everything they've said about Alpine, Dusty, it's a 2x4. Like
Yeah.
everything's hasn't worked. they're not going to be competitive till the summer break. That's what they've said about this car, until they can get an understanding of it, probably get some upgrades around that time when it gets back to Europe. So I'm probably leaving both those guys off my fantasy team as well.
I think due to budget restrictions, I actually have Alpine as a constructor selected on one of my teams. I will be diving into those tonight before things are locked to make the proper adjustments. Those are some of the big storylines here. But we got some predictions for the upcoming season as well. Gager, I know you had about 24 to 30 of them. I said we'd each bring a couple of predictions to the show tonight. Give me your first one. We'll go back and forth on a couple here.
After seeing today, Dusty, I think the streak of Lewis Hamilton not winning ones ends this year at some point. I see him winning at least one Grand Prix, and I want to see that at least. Do I think he's going to win the championship? Probably not. I think that's more between. I think Max is going to be a champion for the fourth time, just with how that car looks and things. But Lewis Hamilton winning at least one of the Grand Prix. I don't think Max is going to run away and win them all again.
My first prediction does have to do with Lewis Hamilton as well, and I am going to say he finishes second in the standings this year behind only Max Verstappen. I mean, when you look at the GOAT discussion, obviously Lewis Hamilton is right near the top of it. You said the cars looked pretty good to start so far this season. I think he wants to finish strong at Ferrari or at Mercedes. Sorry, my mic cut out there for a second. So I think we're going to see like a pretty good season from Lewis Hamilton. Not to officially compete and make it interesting with Max, but I think he wins. I'm not going to say comfortably, but I think he finishes second in the driver's standings at the end of the year.
I could get behind that, Dusty. I don't have a problem with that. That looks second one, and I don't know. Like I said, I just think Oscar Piastri is going to finish ahead of his teammate this year with McLaren. I think Lando is going to, if things don't go well, the pressure is going to get to him now. A year under his belt, knowing the car a little bit more, seeing how he finished the season, I think he's going to be a little bit more elbows out if it gets to that point with his teammate. I think we're going to see some pretty fancy stuff from this kid this year, where to the point where, there's talk about him taking over as the number one driver at McLaren.
And we should have talked about this before we got going, because I have Piastri winning a race this season as my second prediction. I think it happens this year for Oscar Piastri. He is. I know a lot of people are excited about him, but I feel like people should be more excited about Oscar. I don't know if it's just because he's with McLaren and it was a slow first half of the season, but I think people should be viewing this guy as a future star in Formula One. So I think he gets it done this year with his first F1 championship, and I'd like to see it. I like both those guys. I like McLaren's team. I like both of their drivers. I even don't mind Zach Brown. I mean, I got some time for him. Like,
you gotta like him after that episode on Drive. Like he went through the ringer there. You could see him talking to the sponsors. They're worried about Lando because he was their marketability. Like, are we gonna lose this guy? And the car wasn't doing well. And to finally see them start performing, that was and do it like consistently. That he was able to keep the wolves at bay there, I think, because he was a little hot under the collar in some of those meetings with the brass there, and asking him, "Look, you gotta do something here, or things are going to change." So good for Zach Brown. I like McLaren, like you said. Those two are very likable drivers. I like the fact that they're now back in the mix.
Gager, give me one more prediction.
Danny Ricciardo wins a race this year.
Really?
I just think there's going to be a race where the first corner, it's going to be utter chaos, and Ricciardo's going to come through, and that RB Cash App car, it's not a bad vehicle. And from what I saw from Danny Ricciardo, putting in good lap times, finishing top of the table on FP1, I feel like there's going to be a race where there's going to be some DNFs and some accidents, and I think Ricciardo is going to win another Grand Prix this year.
What a time to be alive. What a time to be alive. Give me a prediction for Bahrain. What are you expecting from this first race? By the way, this racetrack is the one that when you play F1, it's like the one that automatically loads. So I've played this track a lot. So when they were whipping through practice and stuff today, I was like, oh, yeah, I know everything about this one. So what are you expecting from here? What's your podium look like? What are you thinking? Do we see both Red Bulls on there? Do we see 3 different teams on the podium this week? What do you think happens?
I am going to go. My podium is Max first. Max first, Lewis second, Lando third.
Lando third, McLaren coming in hot to start the season. I absolutely love it. That is your season preview for the Pit Stop Pals as we get you set as lights out this weekend. Gager, how early are you getting up on Friday?
Well, yeah, I got to get to bed, Dusty. So
I'll text you when I get up in the morning. How's that sound? Gager, time to get up.
I'm always up. I'm always up.
Yeah,
I'm always up. I got to take the dog for a walk, so he always gets me up. So
there you go.
I can't wait.
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
I'll post the results. Don't worry.
Of course you will. I'm waiting for the text in the morning. I can't wait to get it. It's going to be great. All right, that's going to do it for the Pit Stop Pals as another season is underway. 2024 season preview in the books for season 3 of the Pit Stop Pals with Nielson and Gager. Gager, great stuff, buddy. We'll do it again next week.
Can't wait.
The 2 championship contenders giving it everything.
No, Mikey. No, Mikey.
It's lights out.
No,